During this Virtual McArt lesson, we are going to be creating these darling little fall scenes using just watercolor pan sets. Now, I also have a black colored pencil for adding some fine details, and optional, I have a white chalk pencil for adding a couple highlights at the end. You could also use a white colored pencil or even white acrylic paint. Now, I've got 2 pots of water, one for cleaning and one for rinsing. I have a paper towel, a medium-sized paintbrush, which comes to a nice point for doing details, and I have a small sheet of watercolor paper, which has been taped down to a board to stop it from warping. The board that I have used is simply the back of the pad that this sheet of paper came in. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Now, in order to create our beautiful fall trees, what we're going to do is start with a nice light green, loosening up my paintbrush, loosening up my green here by tickling the surface of this tablet to loosen up the color. Now, don't worry too much about where the color is going. This is a very loose, whimsical painting. So down low, we're going to do a little arch of this bright green. Just slosh the color on. Don't think about it too much. There we go. And let's go ahead and slosh a little bit of dark green in there as well whilst it's still wet. That way the 2 colors will blend together a little bit. Beautiful, just down low. Wonderful. Now I'm cleaning my brush off in the dirty water here, and then I'm going to rinse it in the clean water. Dab it on my paper towel just to make sure it is clean. Yep. Now what I'm going to do next is go for a bright, brilliant blue sky. So I'm going into this blue here. You can use whatever colors you have available to you. I'm using a pretty inexpensive set of watercolors here to show you that you can do magnificent work with the most basic of tools. This one cost about $5. Really not very expensive. But because these tablets are hard, I've got to spend a second really loosening up the surface. So really kind of digging my paintbrush in, loosening it up. Now, as I start painting in my sky, what I want to do is leave a pocket of space where my tree is going to go. So I have to think ahead. So in the upper left-hand corner, I'm going to start sloshing the color on. And then straight away, it's going to look like a big white cloud. Again, don't think about it too much. Just let the paintbrush roll around and have some fun. There we go. And I'm going to be left with a large tree-ish shape here in the middle. There we go. Now, the paper is wet. I can carry on adding blue. And can you see how it just bleeds out into the wet area around? Once you've got that water on the page, it's like a vehicle. When you add the paint, it carries the paint across and gives you some fantastic textures. With watercolors, it's really a case of just experimenting for yourself and seeing what these magnificent little things can do. There we go. So I have a tree shape coming along rather nicely. Now you can make your sky as bright as you want. I'm actually going to make mine a little bit brighter at the top. So I'm sloshing a little bit more blue along the top edge here to make my sky a little more powerful up there. Now, if you want to have some blue poking through your tree a little bit, you absolutely can. Just use the tip of your paintbrush and tickle a few little stipples of blue here and there through the tree. So later on, you'll have some little bits of sky poking through. It looks a little bit strange right now, but you'll see it come together a little bit later. Okay, beautiful. Now I'm going to let my sky dry for a second. Whilst that's drying, down here is pretty much dry already. These dry rapidly. So cleaning my brush off in the dirty water, then the rinsing water, and I'm going to go into a nice bright yellow that's a little bit warm. So I'm going to go for this one here, I think. So it's a yellow with like a little hint of orange in it, almost like a buttercup kind of yellow. Now my tree is turning, the leaves are turning to that lovely fall color, the yellows and oranges. And I'm going to have some leaves falling down onto the ground. So I'm going to just gently dust my brush over the top of the hill. So you're going to see a little bit of that yellow color that's in the tree down on top of the hill as well. Beautiful. You'll see it all come together when the tree starts going in, which we're going to do now. So a little bit more yellow, the same color. Now, I've got to be careful. I know my sky is still a little bit wet. If I mix yellow and blue together, I'm going to get green. I don't want a green tree. I want a yellow and orange tree. So I'm going to be careful to stay away from that area. So what I'm doing now is stippling. I am bouncing my brush up and down to leave a fun little bit of texture behind. I want to create the illusion of clusters of leaves in different areas. And if I did the same sweeping stroke that I did down on the ground, I would have a totally different illusion. So I'm bouncing my brush up and down to give that lumpy bumpy texture. And I'm going to go over my blue a little bit just so you guys can see what will happen. If I push it out over here, you can see I end up with a green tone. Now that's actually a really lovely technique if you're going for beautiful summery trees, but I would like a full looking tree with yellows and oranges. So I've got to be careful to stay away from the blue areas. If you do go over and you have lots of green on your tree, you're most welcome to leave it there, or you can add some orange over a little bit later that you won't see as much. So let's stipple all the way through our beautiful big tree. I'm picturing almost like an oak tree with a large tree trunk, thinking ahead. This tree is coming out of my imagination, so I haven't planned too far ahead with this one, and I suggest you do the same. Often the best pieces of artwork come straight from our imaginations. Just use all your knowledge of trees and of fall colors and have some fun. Stippling away. Trying to get a nice jagged edge all the way around where my tree is going to go. There we go. It looks like a yellow cloud floating in the sky right now, doesn't it? It will look a little more tree-ish when we get a trunk on here. There we are, beautiful. Now I'm ready to start getting some fiery oranges on here and turn it into a beautiful fall day. So into the water. And I'm going to use this lovely bright orange here this time. So tickling the surface, activating the color. And here we go again. Now I want to position my oranges lower down and have most of my yellows at the top. So I'm going to stipple again. Oh, that's beautiful. Look at that. Gorgeous glow there. Lovely autumn glow. And just gently tickle through. Sloshing a little bit of orange here and there. We are getting this painting done very quickly. We are creating the impression of a tree. It's not photographic. We do not need to spend a huge amount of time on it. There we go. Gently sloshing it through. Allowing it to drift into the yellow on the other side. You can go back in with any color and brighten at any time. There we are, fabulous. Now if those colors are up in my tree, they're also going to be down on the ground where my leaves are starting to fall. So again, just tickling through the very top area of my hill here, leaving a tiny bit of that beautiful fiery orange behind where you can see a couple of those leaves. We're just creating a little hint that some of them have settled on the ground under the tree. Wonderful. Now I'm going to let that dry, and as it's drying I'm going to start putting in my tree trunk. That's going to make it look so much more like a tree and not a bright yellowy orange cloud floating in the sky. So I'm going to go for quite a dark brown. I'm thinking this one here. It's a lovely raw umber. So here we go. Activating the color. Now I want more control over this color. I'm not stippling. I want a nice dark area. So I'm using a little bit less water so I have more control. Rolling my brush on its side to a nice point. It's a thick brush, but if I use just the point, I can get some lovely fine lines. Feel free to switch up and use a smaller paintbrush if you would like to. It's your masterpiece. Every artist has different preferences. Now, underneath my tree towards the center, I'm going to start sketching in just a little tree trunk like that. Beautiful. Now, mine is more of like an oak tree, so it's quite a thick, chunky tree trunk there. And I'm going to start gently filling that in. Wonderful. Now, my tree trunk here is actually going to be going out and putting some lovely roots out that go on top of the hill here, on either side, and kind of roll down the hill a little bit. Really helps to ground my tree. Lovely. Oh, that's beautiful. Let's go up into the tree a little bit as well. There we are. Now, when you're painting trees, you have so much freedom. What two trees look the same? They're all a little bit different. So you can have branches going anywhere. I am absolutely working from my imagination right now. So what I'm going to do is have a few little branches poking out through my tree. I do not want to draw the branches going all the way through, or it's going to look like someone's cut my tree in half and you're seeing the middle of it. So I'm going to have some clusters of leaves going over the branch and then just little bits of the branch poking through. And you see, by just using the lightest pressure, gently tickling the brush across the surface, I'm able to get some beautiful, delicate little light lines. The heavier I press the brush onto the paper, the thicker my lines will get. And again, you are most welcome to switch up and use a smaller brush if you would find it easier at this point. Remember, your painting is not stuck. You can always turn it to make an easier angle to work from as well. So let's have another one. A little bit poking through the side there. And just keep gently poking these branches through. Not too many. Remember, we've got a very heavy, thick tree filled with beautiful leaves. We're not going to be able to see too many branches. So every now and then, make sure you stop, lean back, and look at the whole tree. Don't add too many. It's very easy to get tunnel vision and carried away, because this is a fun bit, and end up doing way too many branches. So take your time. I think that looks lovely. We don't want to do too much. Another little one out here. There we are. I think he looks lovely. I'm going to just darken up my tree trunk a little bit. There we are, that's lovely. Now, whilst my tree is drying, what I'm going to do is go back into that lovely bright yellow. So dirty water, rinsing water, and I'm going to pick up this bright yellow because it is this time of year, fall, it's the time of pumpkins. So I've decided to put a few little pumpkins sitting around the base of my tree, like my tree is in a pumpkin patch. Now I'm using bright yellow to begin with, and I'm going to just randomly have a few pumpkins dotted around. So let's do one over here. Just a bright yellow base to begin with. Now think about the scale of your pumpkin. Look at your huge tree. A pumpkin is going to be really, really little next to it, not a giant pumpkin. So we're doing just little blobs down on the ground just creating a map right now of where all of our pumpkins are going to go. They're going to look a little bit more pumpkinish later on with some more details and colors. This is just the basic shapes we're putting in right now. Now, the lower down on your painting the pumpkin is, the closer towards us the pumpkin is. So this one here can be a little bit bigger because it's closer towards us. And then over here, I think I'll do just a little baby pumpkin all by himself. And maybe one more over here. I'm getting carried away with the pumpkins. Who doesn't love a good pumpkin patch? There we are. Now, I don't often see bright yellow pumpkins, so what I'm going to do is go in with my lovely fiery orange over the top. Now, the base is already wet, so when I add my orange, you can see it's going to be carried around by the yellow and pushed out to the rest of the pumpkin. So my orange will only go as far as the wet yellow. So I'm just tickling that color over the surface and letting the water pull it around to fill in the remainder of the pumpkin. Beautiful. I have a few cute little pumpkins there. Now, I want to bring my tree to life a little bit more whilst I'm waiting for my branches to dry. And for that, I'm going to use a brighter reddy orange shade. I've got my yellow, I've got my orange. They've blended together to give me a yellowy orange. Now I'm going to use a nice fiery red here. So again, activating, tickling the surface with my brush. It doesn't take a lot of pressure. There we go. And again, stippling, building the illusion of some texture down here. Oh, I like that. Wonderful. That really stands out next to the dark of the tree and the white of the paper down here. Very nice. And I'm using this color to get some nice texture around the edge. Just gently stippling. Very nice. I don't want it just in one area. Even though I'm keeping it low down, I still want to push it through the tree. So this new color that I'm adding, I'm sharing it through the whole tree, not just in one spot. And if it goes through my tree, it's going to have to go on the ground as well. So it looks like a few darker leaves have fallen down. There we are, so just a few little blobs of this darker color on the ground, not too much. And I'm actually going to add a tiny hint of this color on my pumpkins as well, just a little bit. Still waiting for them to dry, so whilst they're still wet, the color blends out beautifully. There we are. Now I'm just going to give my tree a second to dry before I do any other details. I've got wet pumpkins, I have wet branches, and if I try and add more details over the top, those details are going to end up bleeding together and creating some blurry areas. So give it a second to dry and I will see you in 5 minutes. And we are back. Our tree has had a little bit of time to dry. Mine is still wet in a few areas, but as long as I'm aware of those areas and I stay away from them as I'm adding my details, it is absolutely fine. Now, you can most certainly carry on working into this with a fine paintbrush and some dark paint, or you can switch mediums like I am, and I'm using a small black colored pencil for this. So what I'm going to do is add some nice fine details throughout my tree and on the ground in the pumpkins as well. So I'm going to start by adding some skinny little branches at the ends, just darting off in different directions, gently pushing through my tree. It is up to you how much detail you want to work into. I just added a cute little curl there. Totally up to you how much detail you want this tree to be in. I like to add a few spindly little branches at the ends just to create a little bit more detail in my trees. Going all the way through. If you want to add a few finer branches poking through, this is the tool to do it with, just like that, nice and skinny. Beautiful. Remember, your work is not stuck down. You can rotate it to make an easier angle. That way you're not resting your hand on wet paint. So turn it to make it easier. I'm going to make the lower section of my branches a little bit darker. That's furthest away from the light at the top there. That's pouring down from the sky, hitting the tops of the tree. And just carry on cutting through here with some lovely little details. It does not take much at all to bring watercolors to life with a few little details. This is one of my favorite medium combinations, doing watercolors with a little bit of pencil work over the top for some lovely chiseled details. And then I'm going to go down through the tree trunk and add a little bit of dark on the right hand side where all my shadows are building up, going out on my roots as well. Nice bit of fun detail to help build some volume down low in my tree so it doesn't look like a flat area anymore. Wonderful. Now my pumpkins are dry. I can bring them to life. Now what I'm going to do is add the little stalks at the top, and I'm going to do some little whimsical curls. Now I'm working onto watercolor paper which has got that bumpy surface to it. So I'm pressing hard with my black pencil here to get it to go into the paper and get a nice flat surface. So a little bit of detail underneath there as well. Tiny bit of texture on the pumpkin. There we go. One pumpkin done. Let's do the baby one here. I'm going to go through all my pumpkins, adding a tiny bit of detail just like that. There we go, that's my pumpkins done. Now, if you're like me and a huge fan of Halloween, what I'm going to do is turn one of my pumpkins into a jack-o'-lantern. So I'm actually going to do a little face on this one over here. You could do faces on all of yours if you wanted to, or just keep them cute little pumpkins. There we are, I've got one little jack-o'-lantern sitting under my tree there. Now I'm going to go ahead and do some fine details going through my watercolor here, and it's totally up to you when yours is done. If you prefer the watercolor look, you can leave yours as it is. I'm going to use my pencil here to add, let's do a fence behind. So I'm going to do a couple little fence panels going up, pressing nice and hard to make sure I don't have any white dimples showing through. And I'm going to do a very rustic looking, I think, broken fence. So panel kind of going down a bit there. This one drifting off. And same over here. Again, I am not working from an image. I am making this up as I go along. There we are. So I have a little bit of a fence going behind. And then perhaps on this side over here, I'm going to do a bit of an old wagon wheel. So going up and around, not a whole one. This kind of would be the center here. And then some little spokes going out. Like that. Use your imagination. What would you find on a farm at this time of year? There we go. Pressing nice and hard to make sure I don't have anything showing through, any white gaps or anything. Oh, I like that. I have a little wagon wheel there. I'm just going to do a little bit of grass shooting up as well. So a little bit of fun texture underneath my pumpkins. A little bit of grass. A couple of jagged lines. Now, because you're working on such a rough surface, when you're working on watercolor paper, it's like drawing on sandpaper. So your pencil gets worn down. Sharpen it if you need to keep a nice fine point so you can keep those lovely details going. So the duller your pencil gets, the thicker your lines will get. I'm going to do a little bit of tall grass shooting up around the sides of my tree there. Very nice. Might even thin out my roots a little bit. Not too much. Just like I did on the branches, taking out a little bit of detail. A little bit of grass at the base. Out the sides. Very nice. I'm just building up almost like a farm right now. Whenever I start doing a piece of work, my imagination starts to chip in and I am just rolling with it. Anything I can think of, I'm adding in here. Beautiful. Now remember, this is your full masterpiece. Anything you want to add into yours, you can. If you're thinking more Halloween, perhaps you can get a sneaky black cat in there somewhere, sitting in the tree or next to the tree. You can add more pumpkins, whatever you would like. Now I'm actually going to add a little bit of dark detail around my tree. I'm really loving the illustrated look I've got going on down here. So on the lower side of my dark red leaves here, I'm following the shape of the leaves, creating some crazy scraggles. Not too many, just a little bit of curly definition around the outside. So it has a real fun, illustrative look to it. Again, I am playing around and experimenting, creating some fun texture and adding a little bit more detail at the same time. Remember, this is not a photograph. We are just creating a fun illusion of a full tree. So have fun, play around with your tools, maybe add some different colors. You can work back over the top of pencil color using watercolor paints. If you use watercolor pencil though, it will blend out. So make sure you are using normal pencil colors before you go adding water over the top. There we are, a little bit through here. Here we are, he's looking gorgeous. Now if you want to, one last little thing. I've got a white chalk pencil here. You can use a white pencil color if you would like to. And I'm going to add just a couple little streaks of white detail, mostly through my tree trunk to lift it up and create a little bit more of a rounded texture to it. So I've got dark on the right, so on the left, very lightly, just tickling a little bit of light white detail through there. Not much, less is more when you're doing highlights, meaning the less you do, the more successful they are, the better they look. If you go too heavy with your white highlights, it will start to look as though snow has settled on your tree. And that's not going to happen in our beautiful fall painting. So just a little hint of white. If you add too much, you can always go back through with your black again, or even just with chalk pencil, use your finger to just tone it down a little bit. And there we go, our beautiful fall tree is complete. Now that was a really fun, quick little tree painting using some gorgeous fall colors as we are coming into that time of year. And I added a few little pumpkins to mine as I'm super excited for Halloween as well. Now you've got these new skills down, have a go at coming up with your own imaginative fall scene. Maybe add a Halloween spin to yours too. Remember, whatever you choose to do, the most important thing is that you have fun. I really hope you enjoyed this little lesson, and please share your masterpieces with us. We'd love to see them in the comments. You can even email them to us or upload them to the student portal in Virtual McArt.